Thanks. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to Art at Home, sponsored by the Hoboken Public Library. My name is Liz. Many thanks to the great Hoboken Library for allowing us to really celebrate and experiment with our own creativity, to learn about artists that we may not know about already, and to expand our skills and build on the art skills that we already have. And I welcome all artists. It doesn't matter what your skill level is, beginning, veteran, whatever. You are all welcome in this class. All right. We are still in my favorite month of all, Women's History Month. And yesterday was International Women's Day. So bravo to all the females in the world, particularly those of us who are artists. Today, we are about to learn about our second female artist. We will focus on her life and work for the first few minutes of class. We will look at what she creates. We'll talk about her process, and then I'm going to offer you your own assignment, your own artistic assignment, which you can choose or not choose to do. You may come up with a whole different idea after looking at her work. You may be inspired to go in a completely different creative direction, and that's fine with me. What I offer is always a suggested way to go. Our artist for today is named Leila Ali, and I want to just start off by saying she is not related to Muhammad Ali. Someone asked me that right off the bat yesterday. Ali is quite a common name, and there's not a relationship there. Leila was born in 1968 in Buffalo, New York. She is a contemporary visual artist. She is best known for her paintings, her incredibly detailed paintings in which ambiguous scenes of race relations are shown in very graphic clarity, and they're often in a cartoon strip style or format. So in her early life, she thought she was going to be a lawyer or a doctor. She wanted to go that professional route. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree in English and Studio Art from Williams College in Williamstown, Massachusetts in 1991. But she then participated in the Whitney Independent Study Program at the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York in 1992 and completed a residency at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture in Skowhegan, Maine in 1993. She received her Master of Fine Arts in 1994 from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, and she lives and works in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and is now a professor at Williams College. In her earliest work, she drew or painted violent things, but she focused more on the action of the violence rather than the violence itself. So her imagery is not bloody, it's not disturbing, or at least I don't find it so. You'll form your own opinion. And in her current work, there's not a lot of focus on the violent act. She's more interested in what happens before the violent act and after the violent act. The works are tiny, They're very small in scale. So she's kind of unique in that respect compared to artists we've been looking at recently. And she takes many, many, many months of pre-planning to prepare her work. This is another aspect of her process that I think is quite unique and different for her, or in the world of contemporary art. There aren't that many artists who work in that way. She works with watercolor and gouache. Gouache is an opaque watercolor, as you know, those of you who've used watercolor a lot. Watercolor tends to be very transparent and thin, but Ali also uses a type of watercolor called gouache, which is much more opaque. It's a thicker kind of watercolor paint. And her work is based on life experiences. You might not be able to tell that from her work. She likes to explain that all of her thoughts and ideas are coming at her all the time. She's not conscious of this while she's creating her work, but the ideas kind of subconsciously flow through her hand out onto the paper. And I think those of you listening can be empathetic to that part of the process. You've probably experienced that yourselves. And here's a kind of interesting quote for her. So it's about this performative nature of her work. And she says, the paintings can be like crude stages or sets, the figures like characters in a play, and I think of them equally as characters and figures. I love this about her work. It's something that I kind of practice in my own work with my doll creatures. Keep it in mind when you're creating your work today, too. Think about the images you create as part of a theater set. And if you do figurative things in your work, they are the actors or the characters on the stage in your play or story. Her most well-known paintings are from a series called The Greenheads. And the Greenheads are characters that are designed to minimize or eliminate categories of difference. So categories of difference like gender or height, age, and in some ways race. Ali created more than 80 of these paintings. It's incredible, particularly when you think of the fact that she plans so far in advance for each painting. She made 80 of them between 1996 and 2005. She drew on pictures and topics from newspapers, things like protest signs or interesting images of world leaders hugging, but then she tweaked the stories behind the pictures in order to create something distant and new. She also wanted these images to be specific to the event, but also a little bit vague. They have meaning for herself, but she understands that the viewer may bring their own interpretation, and that's fine. She designed the figures to look humanoid, human-like, but they are not quite human. And you're going to see that in a moment. She wanted them to be removed from our world and the social context of our world. So they do have socio-political meaning, yet they exist outside of our world. Since 2015, she's been working on a series of paintings that she calls acephalus. I'm going to put it in the chat box in a moment. Maybe you can figure out how to pronounce it better than I. But the paintings in this series, Acephalus, they feature figures she describes as gender conscious, potentially sexual or sexualized, some of which have racial characteristics, and some of which don't have heads at all. And here's a quote from her. They are on an endless determined trek, a multi-part journey, she says. It has elements of a forced migration. So these images are quite topical to today. She often collaborates. She's collaborated with a dancer, choreographer. So I know there's some of you in this group who are dancers. So you'll be interested in that. She's collaborated with the dancer Dean Moss at the Kitchen. And that's all I have about that. She's somewhere between 53 and 54 and alive and well. All right, ready to look at her work? Let's go. There are several videos about her. Oh, before we look at her work, I want to see if I can put in the chat box the name of this series of paintings, Acephalus, for everyone to see. There we go.
It's acephalus, means without a head.
Right. Thank you, Jane.
No, that's Susan.
Thank you, Susan. I should have known because of your medical experience. Okay. Acephalus. Sure. Like, of course. Oh, and I have forgotten yet again. If I open from my folder, they're going to be too small. So let me drag some of these out onto my desktop. Give me a second.
So while you're doing that, I missed the initial reference to acephalus. Was that in her description or?
She's working now since 2015 on a series of paintings called Acephalus.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Susan. That was really interesting. I've never heard that term before.
No problem.
And there's an illness called encephalitis, correct?
Right. Well, in hydrocephaly and all those things, but I never thought of it as being related to the kepi.
Yeah, in England they say cephalus. We say cephalus.
Ah.
Yeah, cephalus. They say cephalus. We say cephalus.
Ah. And Yiddish we say kepi.
Yes, we say kepi.
Okay, so we're going to stop the share of that and let's try again. Oh, one more moment, folks. I forgot to open the images. We've got this, everyone. Here we go. So here is one of her images. I don't know if this is a greenhead or from the Acephalus series, forgive me. But I always feel like it's not my job to do detailed research. I just want you to get a sense of what her visual expression is all about. Cartoony, yes. A lot of detail. In the video, very short video clip that I watched of her from Art 21, she paints vertically. She pins the paper to the wall. She'll do one brush stroke and then she'll run to her drawing table, look at a sketch, and then on a piece of scrap paper, she'll do further sketching, and then she runs back to the painting. Her palette is a little like yogurt lid that she mixes like 2 colors only on. And she uses very thin fine point brushes. She paints the larger background areas first and then goes in for the details. It appears as if she does the lighter, thinner colors first, as I usually recommend, and then does the darker colors on top, the more intense colors on top. Love this composition. She frequently does this thing where she cuts the image off on the edge of the page. So it's interesting to me that this face is looking up, but then these 2 heads over here are barely visible at all. Okay, let's look at a few more. I'm interested in hearing how you feel about these visually, aesthetically. So this is definitely a greenhead picture. And remember, in the greenhead imagery, she's all about the act of violence. And she stated she's interested in the before and the after, not the actual act. And this one's definitely carrying a message, isn't it?
Well, and there is an act in progress in this particular one.
Not being carried out. This is before
Okay.
it
Yeah.
actually happens.
Unless you take a look at the actor on the left with something around the victim's neck.
It does not appear to me, and you are certainly entitled to your perception, Jane, but to me it looks like the figure in the back is holding the victim's shoulders, not neck. But you are correct in the fact that he's holding this person, and it appears as if he's holding this person against his or her will. It's definitely sexually, gender ambiguous, racially ambiguous, since they're partially green. It's kind of hard to tell if they're the good guys or the bad guys. They're wearing the masks. It looks to me like a mask over their eyes. So are they all crooks involved in a criminal activity? Why is that blue band across their head? Is it an aesthetic decision or is it a socio-political comment?
And what I find interesting about this is the old question, is this art?
Uh-huh.
And I
What do
think
you think? What do you think?
Well, before meeting you and all of you, it was like aside from museum visits, I had never really seriously thought about art. And here, almost 3 years later, I think of art and activism as being very closely aligned. And so I'm noting the lack of a background, emphasizing the subject and the call to consider what you see before your eyes, what actions are happening. And so could you remind me of your question? Because I got a little confused thinking about art versus activism.
I was curious to hear what people thought aesthetically about.
Okay.
And one of the things you just said, it's quite interesting to me. A lot of the artists we've looked at up to this point have filled in their backgrounds, but here is an artist who's deliberately left the background white. And I find it extraordinary in her work, because one of the first things I'm drawn to in this painting is the negative space. And the illusion, because she's made these creatures so flat-footed, the illusion of space, even with the flat white background.
Yeah. And there's very little, in my view, there's very little aesthetic. It's like she was able to pull the aesthetic out in order to emphasize her statement. That's now I'm backing off.
Except for me, there is aesthetic choices here. She's chosen red with the green. These are deliberate aesthetic decisions, I believe, that she's made. She's created these negative shapes, which are, to me, very, very beautiful. She's made the figures large enough that they're not swallowed up by the empty white space. I mean, she's really thinking deliberately about what she's making.
Liz, I found something interesting.
Yeah,
I just wanted to share because
And
I like
thanks,
the
Jane,
art.
for your comment.
I like cartoons. It says that she started out drawing the greenheads as doodles scribbled in the margin of her notebooks during boring art school lectures. First came the big green round heads, later the brown skin bodies dangling loosely underneath like balloon strings. And after a while, some of the big headed doodles began to restrain other big head doodles with tresses and chains. I don't know. I feel like we should have a psychologist take a look at this. But I like it. I think she was having fun and expressing whatever anxiety she had about the class. I don't know. I like it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I have very little information about her background. You can find images of her. I mean, she appears to be mixed race. I don't know what her experiences as a child were like growing up. So psychologically, and this is, to me, this is what makes it art. I can only guess at what's going on in her mind when she creates this. The ambiguity of what she makes is really what excites me about her work. So let's look at some more. Thank you, Dina, for your comments. And sorry for that phone call. There are certain calls that are not blocked. Certain people are not blocked from my phone. I'm guessing this one's from the Acephalist series. See what you think when we look at it. Again, look at compositionally her placement of shapes. I find it conceptually and I don't know, message wise, I find this image more threatening even than the last.
I also find it more interesting aesthetically. The way,
Yes.
I mean, for me, I have a more visceral reaction because of the colors, the shapes, the way the space is used, the composition. This one grabs me and brings me in. The others, you look at and you can have whatever reaction, they're nice or interesting or whatever, but this, I mean, there's everything. It's the movement, the color, the composition, the shapes, that it's like a punch.
Right. This one has power. And
It looks
look at
sorry.
these negative shapes. Oh, I think I cut somebody off.
That's okay, Liz. I just wanted to
got
say,
it.
Robin,
Thanks,
Uh,
Suzanne.
look-
Robin.
sorry,
No, go
it-
ahead, Robin.
it looks like there's a human hand
It
poking
is.
the face. So that's different from the other work where she's bringing some person into it from the outside into her depictions of people or form, expressions. That's so very different.
And that piece of realism for me, you put it into words for me. You made me realize, I think that's where the threatening quality arrives for me, is that this is a real finger or a real like looking finger, and so very close to this creature's eye. It's a little
Yeah.
scary to me.
Yeah, I agree.
There's
But
also that
ahead.
pen,
Thanks,
which is,
Robin. Go ahead, Jane.
yeah, there's also the pen at the bottom of the,
Yep.
underneath the hand. And so another real object, if you will. So I wonder what she's saying. There's a lot that could be
Yeah, could be.
considered.
Who knows? The pen is mightier than the sword. Who knows? The artist tool is stronger than, who knows? Yeah. And that, to me, that ambiguity, that questioning, coupled with her obvious skill and her understanding, as Suzanne put it, of the composition that grabs us, that draws us in, to me, is what makes this art. I just love this. Look at this line here, the pointed finger and the knuckle. I think this line is so incredibly beautiful. And this organic line, in contrast with these very hard-edged geometric lines, to me, that's genius. All right, we'll look at maybe one or two more pictures. Loving the comments today. Keep them coming, folks. There are things in the chat, but I'll get to them later, okay, guys? It's kind of hard for me to read the chat and talk about the pictures at the same time. I guess what I'm saying is when we're looking at the pictures, if you could talk, it's easier. All right, what about this one? Singular muted palette again. She's not a bright color person, obviously. Again, Gender ambiguous, male, female, race ambiguous. Definite emotional content with very little information. That's another skill that she has that I think is very interesting. A lot of textural detail that I'm drawn to. Cultural references. I mean, this headdress, beautiful headdress, is definitely from not an American culture.
Yeah, I love this. I think it's really pleasing aesthetically. The colors, the shapes. And then when you start looking at detail, it's more, you're getting more of the message. For me, it's fear. And in the headdress, I think there's a tipping of the hat to the ancient, like it has a royal quality, and yet the hat around framing the face looks more today. So
Interesting. Yeah. Definitely cross-cultural, cultural mixing. Nice. I love how the headdress dominates the whole image.
She looks like a nun to me.
Aha.
That's the first thing I felt when I looked at it. I didn't know if that's what she intended at all, but anyway.
Okay, cool.
To me, it looks like a hot air balloon.
And for me, I got more of a Muslim reference,
Huh.
more of hijab, except there's no face covering, but the way the head is covered. But it also could be, I think Jane was maybe referring to, it could be a hoodie, the white shape covering. And then the hat definitely looks like a knitted ski cap, a wool ski cap. The light blue thing peeking out from the white egg shape. Yeah, a lot going on in this picture. Again, and it took so little, so little on the part of the artist to get us questioning and thinking deeply about her work. Again, for me, one of the qualities that makes something art and something great art is this ability to make us question the visual beauty, the skill, the concept behind it, and then the questioning. All right, let's one more, because we still have time. You know how I love talking about. Let's do one more from the Greenhead series. Because these are the ones, I feel like these are the ones maybe that people are not drawn to. Again, very flat background. Not really human, yet sort of human. Very cartoony heads. Are they at a protest march? Could they be wrestlers? Will we ever know? What do you think? Like, dislike?
I just find the way she puts the paint on the paper very pleasing, and the movement very pleasing. I'm not getting into the expression too much because it is a little disturbing, but there's a quality to the shapes and the legs and the colors that just is very pleasing somehow.
Okay.
I'm drawn to the eyes where they are expressing. Very,
Okay. Thank you, Robin and Margot.
For me, it just doesn't have the punch and the power of that other one. I mean, it's interesting, but it doesn't make me want to look at more of those. I'm more interested, for me personally, in seeing more of the other. That's where I would gravitate.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Suzanne.
I'm also of agreement with Suzanne. I find them very cartoony and well, they're very graphic, but you know, it's not only that the background is flat, but the figures are flat as well. And I mean, the shapes, it's very graphic with the negative space, but it's not calling me in any way. I'm not getting any feeling. It has a very poster-like effect for me personally.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. Do you want to look at one more from the Acephalus series? Because I think you're all liking those more. Let's see if I can find one. Yeah, here we go.
like the one with the headdress?
Yeah. And on a more universally accepting note. Although this one's really a little, let's see what you have to say. I'm keeping my mouth closed. So similar to the one right before the one we just looked at, but what's your reaction to this? And you can tell me concept or aesthetically. What do you think?
The figures, the face expression always seems to be some fear or some surprise or something that's ominous on the outside.
Yes.
And that seems to be pretty consistent in her work.
Yes. And this face seems to be cut, scarred.
Yes.
Now, we don't know. It could be tattoos. It could be tribal marking. It could be gang identification. It could be many things, but it could also be cuts. So, yeah. Intriguing, right? We can say, I think we can all agree that Layla Ali does intriguing, thought-provoking work. All right, ready for our assignment? Thank you all for your very thoughtful comments. Our assignment for today, and as always, I'm thrilled to see people are already working. Bravo. Today, I want you to think less about your finished product. In fact, I would prefer you not think about the finished product if that's possible. It's very difficult for artists to not think about their finished work. I want you to think about your sketch. I want you to take at least 5 minutes to jot down some thoughts and ideas about what's going on inside your mind right now, at this moment. It doesn't have to be about the news. It can be about your feelings. It could be about the weather. Then I want you to look at those words and try and convey some of those ideas into a picture that conveys an idea. But I want you to spend more time on the sketch than the finished picture. Does everyone understand? For me, in my work, I spend a lot of time doing the sketch. Many artists don't sketch first, but I want you to try and experience that process of planning ahead, just so you can get a sense of how it feels. And here's what I recommend. Start with a small piece of paper, and don't use anything expensive. Just a piece of photocopy paper is perfect. I wouldn't go any larger than 8.5 by 11. And then, because time will be limited, I wouldn't work on anything bigger than this. I think this is 11 by 14. And if you do have watercolor, I would recommend you work in watercolor. And today, I'm probably not going to work on my easel. I'm probably going to work flat on my work table, and I will angle the laptop, hopefully in such a way that you can see what I'm doing. But let me repeat, many of you are sick of hearing this, but I prefer that you not watch me. This is your time to explore your own creative process. Any questions? Basically, all you need today is a piece of paper and pencil. Great. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can always unmute and ask.
Liz, I'm not quite sure I understand.
Go ahead. I love when you ask questions, anyone, because it helps clarify for others who might have questions as well. Go ahead, Suzanne.
So I understand the sketching and what you're saying about that. I'm just not quite sure what you're saying. Just think of some, are you saying you're conceptual? Are you saying think of whatever's in your mind and then draw that? So that's where I'm confused of that part of the assignment.
Okay, so the first step is to jot down a few words that come to mind. I don't want you to think deeply, but the first word that may come to your mind is rain, because it's a rainy day. Then look at those words, see how they make you feel, and then try and create an image that expresses that feeling. Does that help, Suzanne?
Yeah.
Okay, what part do you need further clarification on? Can you?
I can't really verbalize it. It's so I mean, you're not starting, I guess it's how you start, you know, how we all begin the artistic process, and we all begin that obviously very differently in terms of what inspires, you know, obviously we all have our own ways in. And you're just saying whatever you're seeing, snowing, whatever words come in, and then from not the words, but from the feeling that evokes, create something.
Yes,
So then are we talking about abstraction? Are we talking about,
it could go either way.
okay,
You may end up creating little creatures like Layla Ali, or you may come up with something completely abstract, or you may start doing a still life of your bucket of brushes on your drawing table, on
okay,
your workbench.
could be any of the, okay.
Yes. So everybody try not to think too hard about this. Don't over intellectualize. Just see what comes. Because remember, Layla Ali said she just lets the thoughts flow freely and basically lets her hand guide those thoughts onto the paper. Good. I'm going to first look at the chats. Oh, I'm sorry. Some people couldn't hear me.
We were able to work it out, Lisa.
Okay, good.
We fixed it.
Oh, thanks, Laura.
No problem.
And Robin, if you're still here, don't worry, folks, if you have to leave early. I completely understand. Life has a way of getting in the way. You do not need to apologize. Okay, I'm starting with my list of words.
Thanks, Liz.
Liz, thanks for saying that. I actually am dropping off, but I really enjoy the discussion and I appreciate everyone participating.
Sure.
Have a good day, everybody.
You too. So I'm starting my list. Everybody, please remember to mute now. Many artists need silence in which to work. So I've completed my list of words. It's completely irrational. Doesn't make any sense. I'm going to take a minute to look at the words. I'm going to put my list of words away, which is something you may or may not want to do. And now I'm going to start my small sketch. Turning my paper horizontally. And when I sketch, I like to hold the pencil very loosely so that my lines will be very pale and light. This is just a sketch. Remember, it takes Ali months just to even work on sketches sometimes. So sometimes the artistic process is very slow. If you don't even complete the sketch today, that's okay too. Not to worry. Trying to let my mind guide my hand. Just letting the images flow. Keeping it loose. I find that this is one of those in the zone activities. You may find that your whole body starts to relax. You're so focused on the act of drawing that everything else seems to fade away. I hope that happens for you. When you're not worried about the finished product, you become much more visual. And when you're more visual, you can have this kind of out of body meditative experience. And I think you're going to surprise yourself by creating something that you like even more than you normally do when you're incredibly tight and in control. Okay, I think I've finished my sketch. I'm gonna briefly check the chat box. Everybody doing okay? Oh, Suzanne, you've shed your coat. That makes me happy.
It's getting warmer.
Thank goodness. Okay, a lot of people off camera, so I'm hoping that means you're deep into your work. Good. So I finished my sketch. I'm going to switch to my slightly larger piece of paper. Still not very big. And because it's my style, I'm going to sketch first in pencil. And Layla Ali does that. I'm going to keep my rough draft, my sketch nearby as reference. Different from Ali, though, I'm not going to copy it exactly. It's just going to be my reference point. I will probably make changes as I go. After looking at that short video clip of hers from R21, I think she makes changes as well. But as I said, she keeps a little tiny sketch pad next to the sketch, and she keeps making her changes on the tiny sketch pad. So she has multiple sketches for her changes in the process going at the same time. Very, very precise in her work. I'm not there yet in my work. I think I need a few more years of practice to achieve that. And just a side note, any folks who are interested it's snowing here in Hoboken. Good old March. It comes in like a lion. All right. So my prep work is done. And I'm going to start painting with watercolor. Laying out my palette. Squeezing out my colors. This tube won't open. All right. There we go. Unfortunately, I do not have gouache. Those of you who like more opaque colors, you could actually use acrylics or use your watercolor paints, but use less water and more paint. Just check on the time. Plenty of time, everyone. One of the interesting things about the video clip, you just go to Art 21. I'll put it in the chat in a moment. Art 21 and look for Layla Ali. And it's a very short video clip in which she's doing a little interview talking about her work. But what I found interesting was her workspace and how she keeps her materials. You would think she would be meticulous in the way she keeps her surfaces, but nope, it was a mess. She had brushes thrown every which way, papers scattered everywhere. It was a wonderful sight. So this is a small piece. I'm going to stick with small brushes, even for the larger areas in the background. I want to be able to control where the paint goes right up to the edge of the smaller shapes. I am going to start with transparent thin washes first. Now I'm just debating on what color to use. And you can probably see well today. Notice the way I'm holding the brush in the silver portion, very close to where the bristles, the hairs of the brush are, because it allows me to keep control. And I'm doing that because most of the shapes, even the background areas in this piece, are small. And that's why I need more control.
Liz, did you wet your paper first or you're doing it on dry?
I'm doing on dry for this one. If this were a really large piece of watercolor paper and I had a big surface to cover, I would wet the paper first. But because it's a small thing, I'm working wet onto dry. Keep those questions coming, everybody, because I think those are the kinds of things that help people. Thank you, Suzanne. Because it's the initial stages, though, I'm keeping the colors transparent. I can always go back and add more after things dry. I like to keep paper towels handy because I tend to really get messy fingers. And with this piece anyway, I don't want to smudge my images.
When you change colors, do you use it? You use the same brush, you just clean it?
At the moment, I'm using the same brush and I'm just cleaning. My guess with Layla Ali, she had so many brushes scattered around her table. She probably changes for each color. So that's really a work style preference. Depends how many brushes you want to wash at the end, I guess, whether or not you have a studio assistant to wash the brushes for you. When you work with watercolor paint on dry paper, it doesn't move around as much as when you drop the pigment onto wet paper. That's a whole different ball game. Then you can drip and let the watercolor paint flow wherever it wants to go. And that's a great thing to experiment with. It depends on the kind of picture you want to create. So right now I'm working on my negative shapes, my background shapes. And I'm keeping the paper relatively dry because I want to keep the edges of the smaller shapes very sharp. So I want to control the flow of the paint. Now with watercolor paint, it's virtually impossible to mix the same exact color each time, but who cares? That's the beauty of watercolor paint. Those tints and shades are what make it beautiful. It is the nature of the media, and you have to let it do its own thing. There's only so much control an artist can achieve. If you're using acrylic, the possibilities of mixing exact replica colors is a little easier. And you can mix larger volumes of color too, that you can store away in a covered jar and keep to use later on. That's kind of impossible with watercolor paint. It always dries out. But I'm working slowly and carefully, which is interesting. I find the older I get, the more care and time I take with my work. It's not something I was prone to do when I was younger. I don't know if everybody is like that, but it's the way I am at the moment. The other interesting thing to me about Ali is that she works standing up. Which is unusual for watercolor painters. It could be because she uses gouache primarily, and gouache tends to be less runny and drippy. But it really speaks to how much skill and control she has with her media to be able to do it with the paper pinned to the wall. Just tilting my camera up again. I want to see if there's any more messages in the chat. Nope. Good. I'm assuming everyone's okay. But he's looking busy. Okay, great. Tilting back down. So if you're interested in watching me work, I'm at the stage now where I recreated my sketch on my larger piece of paper. And I'm painting in the background and negative or internal shapes of my larger image. I'm using an uncharacteristic color for me. I'm using a yellow green, I think because I'm in a looking forward to spring mood.
What number brush and what kind of brush are you using, Liz?
Oh gosh, I have no idea what number this is. It's so ancient. The numbers are all worn off.
Okay.
It's very fine point and it's a round tip, Suzanne,
Okay, thank you.
and small.
Mhm.
Our wonderful friend and fellow artist Mika turned me on to these Japanese brushes.
Mhm.
We talked about them in past classes. And you can fill the handle of the brush with ink or watercolor,
Mhm.
or you can fill it with water.
Mhm.
And then the water, you can dip the brush into the paint and the water will flow through the handle.
Mhm.
And these are fabulous. I love these, but these I save for the really fine detail work. You know, brushes come in all different shapes. They're square, they're round, they're pointy, they're gigunda. They're, you know, really big brushes, fan-shaped brushes. And they're very expensive brushes. I mean, you can buy horsehair, sable. They run the gamut. A fun thing to do is to go to the Blick website and just look at the variety of brushes.
The problem is I get overwhelmed.
Right. And, you know, you don't have to use expensive brushes. These are cheapo things that I used to use in my classroom for the most part. And they're perfectly fine. I find too about brushes, it's a personal thing. So I would recommend folks that you try all different kinds and experiment. You want to see what feels comfortable in your hand and which shape brushes will do which things for you. I mean, I suppose we could spend a whole class on how to use brushes. Maybe when we're back doing in-person classes, I can do a refresher on that. I'm not sure I want to do that via Zoom. I'm not sure if that would work. But it's a possibility. I'll keep it in mind. So we have 15 minutes until sharing time. And for those of you who are slow, careful workers, and you have not gotten very far in your work, neither have I. So don't stress, don't feel bad. We all have our different style of working, and it is all good. I'm always amazed. People always come to my art shows, and one of the first questions people ask is, wow, how long did it take you to make that? It doesn't matter. To me, that's the least important thing, how long it takes to make something. It's how much pleasure you get along the way that's important. I'm flipping my whole piece upside down so I can get into these large internal shapes first. I'm working from the inside out because it will give the inner shapes a chance to dry, and there's less chance of me smearing as I go. Now I'm going to switch to a larger brush here because the space I have to cover is much bigger. So back to my smaller brush as I get closer to the edge of my shape. Check the time. Still got time. Again, switching to my larger brush. And back to the smaller for the edges. So now I'm working on the larger outer areas. The work is going a little bit faster. Have to be less careful, or I can be less careful. It's interesting, the closer I get to the end of a part of a piece, the greater my sense of urgency to complete is. I don't know what that's about. Maybe everybody feels that way.
I certainly feel that.
And sometimes it changes with each piece, I have to say. There have been things that I've loved working on so much that I never want them to end. One of the large drawings I did for my show in New York, I just didn't want it to end. I was kind of married to it. So it does vary. So I'm adding a little more color because some of my paint is already dry and I feel it's a little too pale in some areas. But I think I have, oh, I do. I have to stop now. You can see I did not get very far, but that's okay. Just really completed my background. And shapes. And it's actually too pale to really look at. Stay like this. No. That won't work. All right, you guys keep working. I'm going to look up who we have next. And then we'll have a few moments for sharing. So I put our next artist in the chat box, and I will be, of course, as always, sending a video out to everyone, giving you more information about her and images, including images of her work. She's a multidisciplinary artist, very much interested in gender issues. And she works in painting and video, and she's pretty amazing. Brand new to me, so it's going to be a discovery session for all of us. Okay. You are welcome, Lily. Thank you for coming. So who's first in my queue today? This is a mystery to me because Shirley was first attendee, but okay, maybe she left. Heather, you're first in the queue then. Oh, great. Were you inspired by my work? This is feeling.
I'm sorry.
Were you inspired at all by my work?
I'm always inspired by your work.
Thank you.
It's a
So
little bit.
what do
Sorry.
you want to talk about it visually process, or did you jot down any words first that
Yes, I
you did this?
jotted down words on a drawing of Michael. And they were contemplative, dreamy, meditative. The picture was of Michael,
Cool.
you know, a sketch. So
I-
I sort of went from like the sketch that of, you know, an old sketch, and used words that from that, and then made something else.
I like them both. Can you hold them side by side?
I'm getting, you know, this time of year, light.
Can you combine them two somehow? Can you think
I
of
was thinking of that. The colors are completely different.
but I feel like they belong together
Yeah,
somehow.
I was thinking of that before, but I didn't know how to do it. Was
New
there-
assignment. New assignment for you. I love the colors and shapes. Definitely love the shapes in this image. Thanks, Heather.
Sure.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Heather. Great. It's great. Suzanne? And everybody keep in mind, process today, not finished product.
So I'm looking out of a window, and so I saw snow. I was thinking snow, fox, birds, wow, kind of, you know, just being amazed. And so I'm still very much in the beginning. I was interested in kind of the shapes of the curtains, the cross lines, the lines of that, and then I started using, you know, watercolor pencil.
Okay, what did you feel about the process itself?
It's not my process, I'll be honest, because usually I start with an image that impels me, that I really want to draw. I'm totally different, so it was interesting. So it was just different. I was trying to think, well, you always like us to draw from life. Unfortunately, the fox didn't stay there, so I had to look up a fox online, but it was totally a different, you know, it brought to mind a different image. I was still trying to do something that I saw, and also the emotion was like, oh, this is amazing. I saw a fox and some figures on a wire. So that was the motivation, but it's a different, for me, it's a very different process starting.
Okay. Cool. It's a great beginning. I'm looking forward to seeing what grows out of it. Thank you for sharing. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but helpful to do something new. So kudos, guys, for trying something new. Esty, you're next. You don't have to share. Remember, this was about process, not finished product.
I actually did not follow the process at all because I couldn't. It's like Suzanne. I mean, I'm not comparing, but I started something with watercolors. I don't know if it had anything to do with whatever we saw, maybe.
Yeah, the headdress for sure, and the dots. She did a lot of dot things, dot
And-
texture.
And then I did my own thing that is
Oh,
for
that's
me
cool.
meditative, and I don't have to think about anything. So
It's lovely.
Cool.
that, but
Is
I
that
did-
one a painting also?
this is markers, and the first one was watercolor.
Okay,
Beautiful.
I like them both. They're very different.
They are, yeah.
All right, cool. I want to see finished when you're done.
Okay, and something else about this artist, she totally didn't do it for me. It's hard. I mean, it hardly ever happens to me that that I have to force myself to think what she meant, what she didn't mean, and the whole, it's unfortunate almost.
No, there's always going to be artists you don't like.
But
This
I
is-
loved all of them in the past month, one more than the other, and amazing. So
There's always going to be artists you don't like. Always.
not that I don't like, I just didn't get it, and it was,
And that's okay. That's okay.
I know.
That's okay. And it's okay that you didn't follow directions. That's fine too.
Yeah. Yeah, don't fire me, please, over that.
You're not fired.
Thanks.
You're doing some interesting work there. And if you're willing to share when they're done, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Suzanne. I see, I like to throw out artists who might be unique and different. Just, I don't know. I think it's refreshing sometimes to look at things that are challenging. Good, Susan.
Yes, I had a headache, a really bad sinus headache again. It's the time of year, so I decided to draw the brain inside my head.
And here we go, cephalus.
Yes, yes, and inflammation around the red. That's the energy.
I
So,
love the colors and shapes.
yeah, these are like crayons that you can watercolor with.
The
They're like,
watercolor crayons. Yeah, I knew they existed. I've never tried using them. What kind of
Yeah.
paper?
watercolor paper.
Yeah, it's nice texture.
Yeah, so there's my brain kind of screaming for Advil.
And there's your brain on drugs.
Yes.
Very cool. This is, see, you may not like the artist, you may not like the process, but look at what you're creating. Pat, you're up. Thanks, Susan.
I did a sketches. Let's see. I have to turn off the filter. I don't know if it's
Yeah. All right. Is it your daughter?
Yeah, always in thinking of her. It's a nutcracker. The nutcracker is behind.
Oh, the
It's in the
nutcracker.
front. Yeah.
And did
I,
you do the process? I see words written on the side.
yeah, cause I was thinking of her, and then she will have her nutcracker show coming up and rehearsal, all that, so I think of it. But then when get to color, I'm always a little nervous, so I switch to the iPad.
Why not? Cool.
So
right.
today
So
artists
you
just
have
give
had-
me
you are
idea to
someone-
do my own thing.
But you are someone who plans ahead. Very much so, I think. You like to sketch first?
Yes.
Yes. So this process is similar to your own.
Yeah, the design process, doing research and all that, it's very similar. And because my graphic design background, we always require to do research, sketches and presentation. So it's kind of a habit.
Yes. Okay, cool. It looks, the lines are beautiful. So if you want to share when you're done, send me a JPEG. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Franz May. Oh, shoot, it's 12 o'clock. Yeah, so.
I don't know. I think I thought about the Women's March and Women's Day, and then I was trying to do similar to what she draw.
It's really wonderful.
So I tried to capture the way she do the eyes and the mouth and just patterns. But I wish it was more detailed, but I didn't have the time to.
Right, Franz May, we were in process. No time
Yes,
to
yes.
finish.
Yes. I just thought about doing like maybe all the women that were before and how could I express that. And then every time I think about women, just comes heart into my mind somehow. It's always heart. So I try to do the shape of a heart for the head.
Yes. But it also looks like a headdress, like Ali would have
Yeah.
done. Fabulous.
Thank you.
Love it. Okay. Thank you so much, Franz May. Margot. And Margot, you may be the last. I think many participants left.
To practice my watercolor techniques. I don't know if you can see this.
Margot, it's not letting me replace the spotlight. Hang on. I don't know why. Here we go.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I put in a background and used, a house to practice some watercolor techniques, basically. And that's,
It's great.
folks, it looks a little cartoony.
No? Well, unless that's what you intended, but I think your perspective is great. You're getting really good with the perspective. Fabulous.
You see the little figures in the windows? Probably not.
Yep, I do. All right, keep practicing those watercolor techniques. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so our next artist is Lynn Hirschman Leeson, multidisciplinary person. You can look her up in the interim, but I will be sending you an email later this week. Oh, there are a few more people, Lorraine and E. Is E a new person? And Lorraine, thank you for coming. I know you can't share video, but I know you're listening.
Yes, always a new person.
Yeah. E is a new person. Welcome, E. I'm so sorry. And you had difficulty hearing? Okay.
Yeah, she was able to hear eventually. She signed in and signed back out, and vice versa.
Well, thank you so much for coming. And we will be same place, same time next week.
Thank you, Liz.
And just a brief thank you before we say goodbye to those folks who came to our opening on Sunday, both Ibu and I. Thank you so much for attending. It was great fun. So take care, everyone. Have a great week.
Great.
Thank you.
Party on.
Bye, everyone. And Liz, you're going to stick around, right?
Yeah, I'm going to stick around.
Okay, bye, everyone.